it's also very good to see there being some responsibility placed on, the internet companies or these apps themselves rather than schools. I think that's a very positive shift. And hopefully the combination of this, as well as the school phone ban, which we spoke about previously, is going to help to reduce significantly the level of phone dependency or addiction that we see in children today.
Some sort of treatment, which is never popular with the voters, which is never popular with the headlines, but actually, how do we deal with this? Because the genie's out of the bottle, Pandora's box is opened. Actually, how can we live in a world where we don't want people to be addicted, or we want to try and reduce their addiction? So
like many schools are already providing quite extensive enrichment through the goodwill of those staff. So if those benchmarks become another expectation, another thing to be inspected against.
Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and sense to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. Now, in this episode, I'm back with Elliot Morgan to explore the things that have been happening in the world of education over the last few weeks. Obviously, it's been a while since the last time Elliot and I caught up, so we're going to go through the stories that we think you should be paying attention to, the things that we think we're sleeping on and perhaps need a little bit more attention, and also any blogs or pieces or articles that we think are well worth checking out. So it's a short one, but it's pound for pound worth its weight in gold. So without further ado, let's spend some time thinking deeply about primary education. Hi, Elliot. It's great to see you. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good, very good. Good to be back as well. I think the last time we did this was March. And I've missed our news episodes. So looking forward to this one.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a while.
Yeah, and so we'll start with the good news, or that's the good news, as we like to call it. What's been on your radar this last couple of months, Elliot?
Well, I've gone for the classic recency bias in terms of what's been happening this past week or so. One that stands out, especially because this is something that we talked about previously with Australia, is that the UK has announced that we're going to follow in Australia's footsteps with under 16s to be banned from social media, so Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, and so on. Very, very promising. I think overall, there's, as we said before when we discussed this, there's a huge net positive to something like this. There's many concerns about the impact of social media that I don't think we truly know the extent to, because it hasn't been researched extensively. But mental health, attention, online safety and safeguarding, bullying. There's a very strong safeguarding argument for banning it for under 16s. So it's also very good to see there being some responsibility placed on the internet companies or these apps themselves rather than schools. I think that's a very positive shift. And hopefully the combination of this, as well as the school phone ban, which we spoke about previously, is going to help to reduce significantly the level of phone dependency or addiction that we see in children today. And it does give parents that fallback that they may need when children are bugging them for a smartphone, or they want access to these certain sites. Like the parents can point to this law that comes out. I think it's in spring next year that they're going to start it from, and say, well, look, you're not allowed to be on it. On the flip side, though, there are concerns, and I think this is something that we discussed at the time of Australia. Whenever there are age checks introduced for sites, there's a big spike in the usage of VPNs. And I know that Australia have noted that since they brought in their ban. And in the BBC article I was reading, there are Australian teenagers boasting about how easy it is to still stay online. Another thing that we talked about at the time is that if these mainstream platforms become harder to access, then teenagers are just going to migrate to smaller platforms that have fewer safeguards, fewer eyes on them, less oversight. And I know that at the time, Australia saw a spike in usage of other apps like Roblox because it has a chat function in that. So how successful it's going to be, or how it's actually going to be enforced, remains to be seen. It's the right idea in theory, but those teenagers who already have access, who are already addicted to social media, are probably going to find a way to still access it. However, as a net positive, I think it is a very, very good idea.
It'd certainly be very interesting to see. Like, if we track all the way back to like tobacco, it's probably like the ninth great public health crisis, with artificial intelligence being number 10, la décima. And so, quite often these things go on and nothing really happens. So the fact that the right noises are being made, I reckon, is progress compared with lots of things, because how many generations grew up thinking that smoking was good for you and would calm your nerves and stuff before sort of big tobacco got outed. But like you say, I think what prohibition has taught us, in the 20s, and what the war on drugs has taught us is that where there's a will, there's a way. And really, I hope some sort of treatment, which is never popular with the voters, which is never popular with the headlines, but actually, how do we deal with this? Because the genie's out of the bottle, Pandora's box is opened. Actually, how can we live in a world where we don't want people to be addicted, or we want to try and reduce their addiction? So, I personally just saw the headline flash up, but I'm going to go dig deeper, because I want to know how they're defining social media, like whether YouTube will be counted in that, because it's certainly
YouTube is counted.
Is it? So no YouTube?
Yeah, and that's been part of the criticism, or the public response to it so far is, there are many GCSE aged students who use YouTube to revise. So, I mean, the details need to be ironed out, but YouTube was mentioned in the initial statement.
Yeah, because then the question is, what am I going to do during my play, or even during the last few weeks of term, whenever I'm just showing pirated DVDs and stuff? Only messing. So definitions, I think, are really, really important, like you said, because like every safeguarding training, there's always a new app that gets mentioned that I've never heard of, and I like to think I'm relatively switched on. I'm like, oh god, what's that? So I reckon more of those will come. But like you said, it's the right noise, and hopefully it's a stepping stone towards the right treatment for the ailment. And so fingers crossed. Yeah.
Crucially, WhatsApp isn't part of the ban. And in my last few years in the classroom, being in year 6, WhatsApp drove a lot of the outside external issues that we had to deal with. Snapchat was one of them as well, but WhatsApp came up a lot. So interesting that's been, not overlooked, but not been included, and whether that might change, because, as long as there's a way for pupils to talk with one another, there's an opportunity for cyberbullying and other things. Another story that stood out to me is that the government is introducing new enrichment benchmarks that schools will be expected to meet, and then Ofsted will consider it as part of inspections in the future. And the benchmarks cover 5 areas: so civic engagement, arts and culture, nature, outdoor and adventure, sport and physical activity, and then wider life skills and employability. And the aim is to create this sort of enrichment entitlement, so all pupils, regardless of background, have access to this broad range of experiences beyond what's provided academically in school. So schools not only need to demonstrate what they offer, but that pupils can actually access and participate within it. So there's positives there. For years we've talked about developing the whole child, this mysterious phrase that we've discussed many times, but time and again, our accountability systems have always focused on attainment. I think there's been a slight shift under the latest Ofsted framework around inclusion and the broad and balanced curriculum, but historically that has been the case. So these benchmarks acknowledging these areas not as like optional things, but valuable in their own right is very positive. But the concerns being, the elephant in the room is that funding. Schools are already asked to deliver and evidence a lot of provision, and we're at a time where clubs and school trips, extracurricular things, these things cost money, and they also require a lot of staff time. I mean, many of the schools that I visit have teachers who are delivering after school clubs themselves and expected to plan it, and they don't necessarily get anything in like compensation or time in lieu or anything in response to that. So like many schools are already providing quite extensive enrichment through the goodwill of those staff. So if those benchmarks become another thing, another expectation, another thing to be inspected against, are teachers going to be, unreasonably asked to give up more of their time without necessarily being compensated, whether that be financially or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, there's the old contributing to the wider life of the school teacher standard that I think that comes under. Whenever as soon as you said it, I thought, oh, it's the cultural capital, but should have been cultural literacy passports that everyone was talking about. So I mean, so that stuff's already in place. I don't know how it's possible that the coaches, the graph going up, and I'm sure it's probably proportional to the cost of petrol and maintenance and things like that. But it does seem prohibitive and it doesn't seem fair. So I think that unless like everything that is announced, unless it comes with funding, it's only going to exacerbate the difference between the haves and the have-nots. So again, watch this space and we'll see. Well, again, it's just noise, isn't it? I don't mean to be skeptical. I don't mean to be down on them, but I just haven't seen anything being actually done, other than really bad PR stunts and a lot of noise without any substance. So yeah, this is meant to be the good news, Elliot. So I am sorry, but I
think it's important to be skeptical of it, isn't it? Like you're absolutely right. The middle class families already take advantage of enrichment, music lessons, extra tutoring and trips and things. And we don't, if this is going to be like a national entitlement, it can't be determined by something like parental income. Because otherwise, we're only serving to increase that equity gap rather than close it.
So the next segment it's bigger than that. It's large. It's the story you think that people are sleeping on, that's going under the radar, and we really need to pay attention ASAP.
You mentioned AI earlier, so this is an AI story, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily gone under the radar. I've seen a lot of people commenting on it online, but I think it warrants its inclusion just in case listeners haven't heard about it, because I think in and of itself it may seem small, but it has, what could this grow into? And what I'm talking about is the announcement that the government is going to launch a trial of AI tutors in English schools. And the aim is for it to be, personalized one-to-one support, but at scale, and particularly for disadvantaged pupils who wouldn't otherwise have access to private tutoring. So the government claims that the initiative could support up to 450,000 pupils who are eligible for free school meals in years 9 to 11, I believe. And the DfE says that they plan to co-design these tools with teachers and industry partners, and then beginning with teacher-led development from around now, from the summer term. And then the trials are going to begin in secondary schools later this year. And the government expects that those tools will be available more widely at the end of 2027. And they've stressed so far that this AI tutoring is intended to complement what teachers do, but not replace them. And they've also promised it will be rigorously tested, it'll be benchmarked, there'll be staff training before any sort of large scale rollout. Now, as with our other stories today, very promising, but there's also things that raise eyebrows. So high quality one-to-one tutoring, we know the efficacy of that. We know that is like the most impactful form of teaching. There's the 2 sigma problem, and we've always talked about how could you address that, and AI is one way that potentially that problem could be addressed. But currently we know the access to something like that is highly unequal, as we were just talking about with middle class families. So if AI can provide some element of personalized support or learning at essentially zero cost, it could genuinely increase the access for disadvantaged pupils. But as I'm sure you're skeptical as well as I am, we've seen a lot of edutech over the years come and go, and often they're developed around what the technology can do rather than how pupils learn. So that involvement of teachers from the outset is very promising, and hopefully that increases the likelihood that it's going to align with curriculum and align with classrooms and align with how pupils learn. But there is that allure of it being this adaptive system for personalized learning, because often that personalization is just slowing or increasing pace or changing question selection. Having actual instructional adaptation for what pupils need is a lot harder. So it'd be interesting to see whether that tool that they're talking about actually adapts in that way, and to improve learning. So the current framing is that it's AI as an additional support. It's going to supplement teaching. It's going to provide extra tutoring for pupils who wouldn't otherwise get access to that. Very, very promising. and I look forward to seeing how the trial goes and what the finished product looks like for schools.
This is actually one that I saw and read and reacted to, and there are, not even cynicism. I just think this is a bad idea. This is California spending $9 million on an iPad for every kid and then taking the iPads back because there was no discernible difference. Right? But I think the positive is that it helped me realize something about what's going on. Right? I mean, from the outset, the timeline is ridiculous. And from a technological point of view, artificial intelligence, in inverted commas, is not there. It is not capable of supporting pupils who struggle the most with mathematics. We have the tools. They are qualified teachers. And if you want to reduce the disadvantage gap, you need to give them expert support, not an approximation of expert support. And so I think, no doubt, really well intended. But I think rather than face the difficult challenges of education, lots of the artificial intelligence conversations actually saying, here's this shiny thing over here that we don't have to actually think about the difficult things we've been dealing with. We don't have to think about curriculum, assessment, school conditions, the lack of expertise within schools, or the number of experts we need to support our most vulnerable pupils. And instead, let's talk about what the potential might be of this tool over here. But actually, if you look beneath the surface of some of these companies, like, there are big issues with the valuations of lots of the companies, and there are big issues. It's looking more and more like a bubble than anything that's going to substantively change how society is. And I think the only difference is that it'll probably bankrupt society much worse than in 2008. The fact that all of a sudden we're going to say, right, we're going to use this and we're going to reduce the gap is actually just another way to avoid actually trying to bridge the gap. And so who's going to lose out? The vulnerable pupils who are being tested on here, because they are guinea pigs with a tool that could perhaps even be detrimental to their mental and physical health. So yeah, I mean, it's not skepticism. I really am worried about that, and it's indicative of a government that's not really taking education seriously. So I don't mean to be a downer today, but yeah, that one really got my goat.
I think the iPad. The California iPad example was a very interesting one that you bring up, because that was $1 billion, if I remember, or over $1 billion. And wow. It was like every school, every pupil, was it an iPad for every pupil in California? But my understanding of why it failed, there were a few factors to it, but the biggest one was that they didn't train teachers in how to use them. It was very much like throw money at this idea, and the expectation is that because we have spent money, like, because A has happened, B is going to happen, learning is going to occur. And I share that skepticism in this, that it seems very good on paper, but as you pointed out, AI has many limitations, and it isn't yet as good as a teacher is. So there are a lot of questions raised about it, and yeah, we'll wait with bated breath to see what it actually entails.
I've seen videos where actually it's making itself stupider, and that it's actually getting worse over time because it keeps feeding on its own garbage. And so obviously it's eating its own slop. And that's just going and making it worse and worse every iteration. I can't remember exactly who shared the video, but it was like someone in the tech industry. So the more time goes on, the less confident I'm getting in any of this stuff, really, but who am I to question? So I think the Substack, the Beehive, the blog is well and truly back. Have any been standing out to you, Elliot, over the last couple of weeks?
Yes, there's one in particular that I really enjoyed by Efrat First, who I enjoy everything she writes, and it was called "When Prior Knowledge Helps and When It Doesn't." So there are a lot of seemingly simple statements that we repeat regularly in education. Things like stories are psychologically privileged. And this is a piece that starts with one of those familiar ideas, in this instance being that prior knowledge matters. But it forces you to think more carefully about what we actually mean by that. So it's a simple statement, but there's a lot of nuance to it, which Efrat First really unpicks quite well. And the central argument that she makes is that prior knowledge is not inherently beneficial. And we often talk about prior knowledge automatically leading to more learning, but the research suggests that there's a lot more nuance to it than that. So prior knowledge can help learning, but it can hinder learning or have little effect at all. And that's what First refers to as the prior knowledge paradox. So within the Substack, she draws on research that has found that while prior knowledge is a strong predictor of what pupils can know in the future, it's not necessarily a strong predictor of how much they will learn. And that's why she talks about, instead of thinking about what do pupils already know, we should instead be thinking about how is the knowledge they already know structured. So, you know, she talks about how we worry about retrieval and relevance and misconceptions and things like that. But instead, we should be thinking about whether that prior knowledge is really shallow or if it's deep. And that aligns with what we know about novice learners and explicit and direct instruction and why they're so effective. And she talks about that if prior knowledge is shallow, then it needs to be very carefully activated and we need explicit guidance. But if it's deeply embedded and it's wrong, like a misconception, then it's already woven into this entire network within the brain of understanding and is therefore quite resistant to change. So very interesting Substack. I really recommend you go and read it. My biggest takeaway was that prior knowledge is an important starting point for learning, but actually the structure of that prior knowledge is determining what we need to do next as teachers. Has anything come across your I was going to say your scrolls online? I don't know if that makes sense. I'll read you that bit.
My virtual desk, so to speak.
Yeah. Has anything come across your timeline?
Yeah, I mean, maybe not blog-wise. I've had some interesting ones, but nothing that's really jumped out at me. But I think the one thing that everyone should read is I suppose, in terms of accessibility, it's blog-like. It's the 10 Common Sense Misinterventions from Step Lab, which obviously is a fantastic outline of some of the ways that we can misappropriate or misinvest our time with the aim of supporting pupils with special education needs and disabilities, when actually it's high quality education and high quality teaching and learning that is more likely to have an impact. So almost the top 10, I reckon it could probably it's ruffled a few feathers. A lot of people will be nodding in confirmation bias, but hopefully enough people read it that it actually sort of really develops the conversation about how we should be behaving in the classroom. So obviously we had the paper where it was about accessible by default or design. I can never remember which word it is. So you had the accessibility piece from Jen, Peps, and Josh, and then this is almost like the follow up, the 10 Common Sense Misinterventions. And I think well worth reading. I'll make sure it's tagged in the newsletter next week, even though I don't think this will be a Saturday. I'm not 100% certain yet. But yeah, have you had a chance to check it out, Elliot? I'm sure that it's in your wheelhouse, so to speak.
I have, and I also recommend it because it's very introspective and it's talking about a lot of practice that's very embedded especially in primary schools, and it confronts a difficult issue in terms of these are things that we've always done, things like zones of self-regulation, and I forget what else is in there off the top of my head. But it's important to have conversations about these things. The only way we improve is by constantly looking at what we already do and not just assuming because it's in place, because it's well embedded, because it's something we've done for years, that it is effective. So yeah, I also recommend going. And it's also quite short and a very quick, easy read. So yeah, go and read it.
What is the name of the actual Substack you went to? So if you got a blog post and a name, because normally people will just Google the name of the Substack itself, I think, in search of.
Yeah, I think it's something like Making Sense of, let me check. So FRAP First is the author, Making Sense of Learning Science. If you Google Substack FRAP First, it comes up.
I think, if you agree or disagree with anything we've discussed, I think the comments is definitely the place to let us know. I made a comment on a podcast today. I was very disappointed that the start of their World Cup coverage, all of a sudden there were 3 minutes of pre-roll ads and then advertisements like for maybe 2 minutes a number of times throughout. And I said, well, there's no possible way you can, because I was listening to it, I was on the bike and I just had to stop because it was jarring how, it was in the middle of conversations. There was no rhyme or reason to it. But people have been either liking that and commenting or vice versa. So it seems that people do use Spotify comments to have conversations about their favorite podcasts, So, I mean, any kind of comment, any kind of share helps spread the word. And I think, with this one, there are a lot of things that I think teachers need to be aware of, but also teachers need to be thinking critically about. But I'm sure Stappy listeners don't need me to tell them that. So all I said to do is say thank you very much for joining me, Elliot. It's been a pleasure. Looking forward to next time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. See you next time.
And everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.